I just got to say, right from the jump here, that this isn't what we thought we'd be doing right now. We thought that we would all be together for our convention. We thought that we'd be holding our first ever convention in Spokane. We thought we'd be seeing folks that we hadn't seen for a while, maybe since the last convention. Lots of hugs would be happening. But we can't be together, and we are not going to let a little thing like a global pandemic stop us from holding our annual convention. So welcome to our first ever virtual convention. And I got to tell you, I have been so inspired by how we have stayed strong together during these incredibly tough times. Earlier this year, someone said to me, "This is why people have a union. It is for times like these. It is for times when we have just got to link arms and help each other through this COVID crisis. It is for times when we have to stand up for Black and brown caregivers against racism. It is for times when we have to stare down those that would have the nerve to try and cut funding for us and the people that we care for in the middle of this crisis. That is why we have a union, for times like these." And in the midst of all this craziness, our union still managed to rack up a pretty impressive list of wins so far this year. We passed a new law against harassment, abuse, and discrimination of caregivers. We were the first state in the nation to win hazard pay for home care workers and COVID pay for nursing home workers. We are leading the way nationally to make sure that home care workers have real PPE and that we are treated like the healthcare professionals that we are. We are marching arm in arm, demanding racial justice, declaring that Black Lives Matter. We have got a presidential candidate with an economic plan centered on care, calling for a living wage and a union for all caregivers. And the members of our union are as fired up and motivated and active as we have ever been. When the pandemic hit, we did not miss a beat. We are doing online member meetings and Zoom meetings with legislators. Here we are at our virtual convention. We just figured it out. 775 caregivers are just making it work. And as caregivers, we've been on the front lines of this pandemic. We have been taking care of our clients, our residents, our families, our communities. We are caregivers. We take care of anybody around that needs it. That's what we do. I think of Shazia in Kent, who saw that there were people in her community who needed care and took on more clients during the pandemic, despite the risk to herself. I talked to Shazia just the other day, and she told me that she is still taking care of 5 clients. I think of Desiree in Kennewick, who at the beginning of the pandemic, when there was a run on toilet paper, do you remember when that was a thing? She took it on herself to deliver toilet paper to her clients so that no one would have to go without. And she kept making sure that folks had what they needed, even after she herself tested positive for COVID. Thankfully, she is better now. And I think of our union sisters and brothers in Toppenish, which was among the hardest hit nursing home in the entire state. At one point, 35 workers at Toppenish tested positive for COVID. Workers who were well worked back-to-back double shifts for many days in a row. They quarantined themselves from their own families in order to keep not just their families, but their residents safe. I am thrilled to report that today, all of our union members at Toppenish have recovered, but in that moment of crisis, the workers at Toppenish rose to the occasion and they did whatever needed doing. Because in this union, we take care of our residents, We take care of our clients. We take care of our families, our communities. We take care of each other. And while we do that, we need to demand that we are taken care of too. What is also true is that the craziness that is this world today doesn't affect us all equally. Black lives matter. I want to draw a bright line connecting caregivers and the fight for racial justice. Back in the 30s, they passed a bunch of laws to protect workers. They created a minimum wage and overtime pay and the right to a union, a lot of basic laws that we all take for granted now. But guess who wasn't covered by those laws? Guess who they cut out of those laws? Farm workers, domestic workers, caregivers. And why was that? Why'd they leave caregivers out? Because back then, same as today, caregiving is work that is largely done by women, oftentimes by Black women, women of color, and immigrants. So we didn't get the basic protections that everyone else got. Fast forward many decades, and we are still fighting the same systemic racism. When caregivers here in Washington wanted a union, we first had to pass a law making it legal for us to have a union. We had to fight to be covered by minimum wage laws. And just this year, in 2020, we had to pass a law protecting caregivers from harassment, abuse, and discrimination. Caregivers have always had to struggle to win basic standards that other working people take for granted. And that is why caregivers know Black lives matter. That is why we stand up against acts of hate towards Asian Americans. That is why we fight for immigration justice. Because our fight for dignity and respect as caregivers has always been tied to the fight for racial justice. For us, this has always been one fight. And while caregivers and really all workers struggle during this pandemic, you know who's not struggling? Let me tell you who. Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, made $13 billion in a single day during the pandemic. $13 billion in one day. And he is not alone. Across the country, his billionaire buddies have made $637 billion in profits during the pandemic. $637 billion. Remember that number. Meanwhile, 30 million people are unemployed in this country. Millions more are risking their lives going to work every day, not just caregivers, but grocery store workers and farm workers and delivery drivers. And these folks are often working for near poverty wages. They are certainly not making anywhere close to $13 billion a day. And what do we get for that? What are they proposing to do for caregivers that are putting themselves in harm's way to keep others safe? Cuts. They are proposing massive, devastating, offensive cuts. Folks may have heard DSHS released their first round of budget proposals, and their cuts would kick 20,000 seniors and people with disabilities off of home care. That is 1 in 3 people who get services, 1 in 3 of the people that we care for. The cuts in wages and benefits they are proposing could mean a wage cut of up to $1 an hour. And in nursing homes, perhaps the most dangerous place to be during a global pandemic, they are proposing cutting nursing home funding by $60 million. This is what we're up against. And I want us all to remember when they say, because they will, remember when they say they have no choice. Remember when they say, look, our hands are tied. There simply isn't any money. Remember that $637 billion in profit that has gone to the richest few, and call bullshit. The challenges that we are facing, sisters and brothers, they are huge and they are daunting, and they are perhaps the biggest we will see in our lifetimes, but we are 775, and like always, we got a plan. Members are already in motion. Caregivers have been calling into the governor's office. They are having Zooms with lawmakers demanding that they protect long-term care. Folks who think that they can cut long-term care quietly have got another thing coming. And it is good that caregivers are gearing up for a fight, because in order to beat back these cuts, we are going to need to fix our messed up, broken, upside down tax system. Let me break this down. The heroes of our state, the heroes of the day, are the essential workers, like caregivers, who keep showing up for work. Those of us who risk our health every single day to keep going to work, and we pay about 20% of our income in taxes every year. Meanwhile, billionaires pay about 3% of their income in taxes every year. It is well past time that the richest in this state pay their fair share. We will likely never have a better opportunity to right this wrong, and we are ready for the fight. But if we're going to have a shot of getting all of this done, we know that we have to elect folks to the state Senate who will pass a fair tax system. We have to elect working people and people of color and champions for caregivers. We have to elect people like Ingrid Anderson, a nurse in the Snoqualmie Valley. We have to elect Twana Nobles, an educator and mom of 4. We have got to re-elect Jay Inslee as governor of Washington State. We have got to elect Mike Cooney as governor of Montana. We have got to make sure Steve Bullock represents Montana in the United States Senate. And we have got to send Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to the White House, because we know that elections are power and elections matter. We recently lost a legend in civil rights leader and Congressman John L. Lewis. Congressman Lewis believed that you only pass this way once, and you have to give it all that you have. He believed that we have a responsibility to make this world a better place, that we have a responsibility to do our part. And it is real clear that our part is to lead. As caregivers and members of 775, our job is to lead the way to a more just and humane world. That is the mission of our union. And as I look around, I see that that is exactly what we are doing. I see Shazia doing her part, taking care of as many clients as there are hours in the day. And she is also out making sure that everyone she meets is registered to vote. I see Desiree doing her part. She's still making sure that everyone has the supplies that they need, but she is also on our IP bargaining team. She's negotiating with the state, fighting against those cuts. I see Julie and her coworkers at the nursing home in Toppenish doing their part. After getting out of lockdown, they held actions on the streets of Yakima. demanding PPE, declaring that Black Lives Matter in 102-degree heat. They were out there. Sisters and brothers, we've been through tough times before. We always come out the other end stronger. The caregivers of our union have been fighting for a better world since we started. We are not slowing down, not one bit. We were built for this fight. Let's go get her done.